This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. This is episode 255 of the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I'm Jamie Bogner, and we're sitting out on the patio of Ecliptic Brewing. And joining me today is John Harris, founder of Ecliptic. Welcome to the podcast, John.
Thanks, Jamie. It's good to be here.
It was fun. You were hanging out with us earlier this week for a brewery accelerator here in Portland. And before I get out of town later on today, I wanted to pop by. So we're sitting out on the patio, and you can hear some G&D chillers, cranking away, keeping some beer cold in the background there.
That's right. Those are G&D chillers, and they're going to get a workout here starting tomorrow for the next 6 days or something.
Oh, you got some warm weather coming in, huh?
Oh, no. It's warm, like 95
like heat dome
tomorrow. Yeah, heat dome stuff. So we'll be at 100 for a couple days, looks like, and yeah, the chillers are definitely going to be working their butts off.
Sure.
And they're hopefully not going to go down.
Hopefully not. Anyway, we're going to talk about Ecliptic's approach to brewing. You've got a diverse kind of pub-focused piece here, but also a packaging side of the brewery, distribution, and kind of make a broad range of styles with some thematic ties through. We're going to talk about all of those things. But first, what if you could chill your beer with a more efficient chiller? The answer: G&D Chiller's new micro-channel condensers. G&D's micro-channel condensers are highly efficient in hotter regions, use a fraction of the refrigerant over traditional chillers, which provides less opportunity for leaks, along with lower global warming potential. G&D Chiller's engineers are committed to green technology design while developing a more energy-efficient chiller for the brewing industry. Contact G&D Chillers today at gdchillers.com. Also, are you ready to brew like a pro? ProBrew has the equipment, systems, and technology to take your brewery to the next level. Check out www.probrew.com for info on patented ProCarb inline carbonation technology, ProFill rotary filling and seaming can fillers, the Alchemator inline alcohol separation system, 7 to 50 barrel brew houses, and more. ProBrew, a subsidiary of Technoblend, now a Promoc brand, offers the craft beer industry innovative solutions to help you brew like a pro. Go to www.probrew.com for more info. John, we normally start the podcast off talking about your background. So what's that arc of brewing history look like for you? Where'd you start? And what was that moment of beer? And then how'd your career progress through the years?
Gotcha. Yeah. So it all kind of started when I was younger, and this guy named John Rockwood turned me on to DAB, D-A-B, Dortmunder Aktion Brewery out of Germany. And he's like, we're not drinking that crap. You're going to try this. And he kind of turned me on to this import beer, and it was like, wow, this actually has some interesting flavor to it, other than the local Blitz or Ole.
Sure.
And so that was my first touch of, imported beer, I guess you'd say. So that kind of sparked my interest, and as I just went along trying more beers, and then the whole microbrew scene started in about 1984 here in Portland, and so I'd be trying the Widmers and the Bridgeports and
Sure.
the Pyramids up in Kalama, Washington, and Burt Grant, of course, had his black as oil Death Imperial Stout and Scottish Ale and
that Burt Grant Scottish Ale, that was one of those pivotal early beers for me.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And then I just kind of delved into the scene, bought my first Michael Jackson book. Never really homebrewed very much. I mean, I did homebrew with my friend Richard, and we blew up some bottles and stuff, and had some good old fun times. And but I really kind of was drawn more just to the whole beer scene. And then and I was probably a beer geek, what we call a beer geek, and I was living in a house with a couple of women friends, and one of my housemates, Lori, came over one day and said, here's your job, go get it. And it's simple black letters, just said, brewer wanted Hillsdale Brew Pub, for the McMenamins. And I said, Lori, I mean, come on, I'm not a professional brewer or anything. I know a bit about beer, but she goes, just go get the job, okay, would you? And I said, oh, okay, I'll go get the job. And so I went on down, and a few days earlier I had met, through my friend Lori, this guy named Conrad Santos, and just met him and casually. He's a nice guy. We just hung out and one evening, and then So I go in for my interview at the Hillsdale Brew Pub for the McMenamins, and this is 1986. And I can say I'm here for an interview. I go on back, look for Conrad. So I went back and say, I'm looking for Conrad. I'm here for an interview. And he said, well, just a minute. He was digging hops out of a bale of hops in the cooler. And he kind of looks back like that and looks back at me again and goes, you want to be a brewer? Because he had just met me, right? And so I ended up interviewing, and then he said, call me in a week. And I said, okay, I'll call you in a week. And I called him in exactly a week. And I said, Conrad, it's John Harris. Do I get the job? He's like, well, I can totally tell he has not really even made his mind up yet. He's like, yeah, you got the job. You got the job. I'll see you on Monday. And I'm like, well, Conrad, I have a job. I got to give notice, And he's like, oh, okay. And he said, okay, well, this will be the day. Only thing you got to bring us some rubber boots. Bring rubber boots. I said, okay. So I rolled in that day, 22 years old, like, woohoo, I'm going to be a brewer, And we ended up having the day to be able to long well. They had me read the hydrometer. I knew how to do that. So that was the first big test that I could. And I read it to the same, specific gravity he got. So he was happy with that. And then it came, all right, man, get those rubber boots and clean out the kettle. At that moment, I remembered that I didn't get the rubber boots I was asked to get. And I was like, this might be over before it starts. And so I said, oh, wait, I have those hiking boots in the car, and I'll put those on. But one of the soles, the front of the shoe, it's separated. So it was like, the sole was separated from the leather with these hiking boots. Oh, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Get in the kettle, of course. The hot wort starts going into my foot. I start jumping up and down, dancing. Wow, ow, ow, ow. And he's like, what? And this guy, he's kind of a great guy. I'm still friends with him, but he's just kind of a very intense, kind of spastic dude. He's like, what's going on? What's going on? My foot, I'm burning. My foot's burning. He's like, what? Get out of there. And I hopped out of the kettle, and he realizes I didn't have rubber boots. I had hiking boots on. He's like, okay, rubber boots tomorrow, right? Got it. So I get out of work, and I immediately drive to an old chain called G.I. Joe's, and I had some rubber boots for my second day.
Sure.
So that's how I kind of got into it. Just kind of right place, right time.
Learning on the job at McMenamins back in the day.
And then, the interesting thing about McMenamins was that it was basically a glorified homebrew setup. We were making beer with malt extract. We were taking crystal malts. Remember what crystal malt was, Jamie?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's not really around much anymore.
Yeah.
Everything's so pale now. But we put specialty grades. We make Terminator Stout, for instance. And we've got our black malt, our chocolate malt, our crystal malts, and maybe some Munich malt. And we put it in these big mesh bags, and we'd make a tea with it in the kettle. And then we add the extract, and then away we go, and then ferment it in three barrel open fermenters in a non-refrigerated room with air conditioning.
Amazing.
And that's what Sierra Nevada did, right?
Hey.
So that's good enough for the brothers. And so I learned a lot. I kind of look back and I kind of go, I probably learned more.
What was yeast like back in the day? I mean, now of course you could do that with something like Quake yeast.
No,
be perfectly fine. But
Y Yeast Labs was just getting started.
Yeah,
and that was the first yeast lab for brewers in America.
Sure.
And it was like, okay, get a 10 out of the till and go over to this corner store and buy a 6-pack of Sierra Nevada. And we then take the Sierra Nevada bottles and we'd pour out half, pour half into a glass, swirl the rest. The bottom was all bottle conditioned, and then we'd just dump the Sierra Nevada into our starter.
Hey.
So Chico yeast is the most prolific yeast strain.
Sure.
In craft brewing, and that's what was pretty cool about Sierra Nevada was the fact it just didn't say no. I mean, you couldn't get Anchorage yeast to save your life, but Sierra's was just being given away every day in their bottle. But anyhow, sorry, Ken. If you happen to listen to that.
I don't know. Things have kind of worked out okay for them. I'm sure they're not too worried about all of that.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, there's a standard, right?
It's interesting that a brewer said to me a while back, and I hadn't really thought about this, but he said, kind of like the idea of how Sierra Nevada's retained very relevant in the industry. They're very innovative, and their beers they follow the trends just like all of us do. And one guy said, well, they gave their yeast away. So, our beer tastes like their beer just because of the commonality is yeast strain. I know it tastes exactly the same, but the point was just that they help stay relevant because the yeast they use is the yeast so many other brewers use. And I never thought of it that way before, but it's like, wow, you're probably got a point there. So
there's something amazing in this broader world of craft beer where giving it away, in fact, helps create a standard and also, creates a deep respect amongst fellow brewers for what you do. I mean, I think that, especially when it comes to something like Sierra Nevada, or if you look at, double IPA and Pliny the Elder, or if you look at, we see it more recently in brewers that have been giving away their information on hazy IPAs. Like, it's an interesting one where that, while it's not open source per se, by sharing, you create connections which, build this long-term relevance for what you do.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking also that avenue.
Sure. So you come out of McMenamins and where you're extract brewing or partial mash brewing or whatnot, and then fermenting with bottle dregs from Sierra Nevada back in the day. That's amazing. Where'd you go from there?
Yeah, so I did about 2 years at McMenamins, just shy. Ended up starting at the Hillsdale Roadhouse, and then me and another guy were hired because McMenamins was opening. They had the Hillsdale Pub, which was the first brew pub in Oregon, and then they had the Cornelius Pass Roadhouse, and then they had the Lighthouse Pub in Lincoln City. So 2 brewers were hired, and the idea was that Conrad would run one, I'd run one, and the other guy, his name was Greg, would run the other one. And actually, Greg Kepke was the founder of Rogue Ales, actually, back in the day when he got the Nike money from Jack Joyce to open that, and eventually Gregory transitioned out, and John Meyer became their brewer, but Greg Kepke was one of the other guys hired when I was.
Yeah.
Was going to go to the Lighthouse, but anyhow, there was another brewer too, and he got let go or quit. So I got shuffled to the Roadhouse, where I was brewing in a kitchen. So it was like the kettle, the hood, and the grill top. So it was like the kettle was just open, going right into
Sure.
And the fermentation room, had an air conditioner, but there's no refrigeration on these fermenters. These was just set the AC and cross your fingers, and so I did some time at the Roadhouse. I'd come in one day and I pitched the beer, and come in the next day, it's, you could tell the kreuzen had risen and the kreuzen had fallen and it had covered the outside of the tank, and it was 82 degrees. I'm like, well, that's not going to be what we wanted it to be. So I really think that I could have, if I had gotten this job like at Widmer or Bridgeport, the 2 other breweries in Portland, and Portland Brewing opened up right before I started being a brewer. But if I had gotten a job with those breweries, I don't think I would have learned as much as fast as I did, but how not how not to make beer, but what's really important in a brewery.
Yeah.
And so
what you can do and what you can't.
Yeah, for us, like the extract thing was always inconsistent. So we were getting 82 bricks and we're getting 78 bricks, and one might think that's not that big a difference, but in the wintertime when you're trying to get extract out of a 55-gallon drum and the kitchen's at 40 degrees because it's not heated overnight. I mean, one day I drove from the Roadhouse to Hillsdale, and they started pouring me buckets of extract. And by the time I got back to the brewery, I had 2 because the cook was watching it. And I got the other 5 I needed from Hillsdale, and I drove 10 miles to get them. You know what I mean? So eventually we, Conrad and us, convinced the brothers McMenamin to take Hillsdale to all grain, and at that point I'd been the most tenured brewer. So I said, hey, I would like to go back to there and brew the all grain batches. And so that was in like 87, probably early 88. We did that, and then we were doing all grain brewing there, and the beer started improving just because we had more control over the malts, pale malts, are sold in beer.
Sure.
So, anyhow,
of course, the entire ingredient picture for beer was also different back then. Hops that you had available to you, malt, everything else. Like, I mean, there wasn't the industry geared around selling all of these things to craft brewers in the way that there is now.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, you had a couple hop companies that are still around, like Haas and Steiner and Hop Union, and of course changed his name multiple times. But the point just being that I think that I remember I still have the Haas hop book from then, and it has like 9 varieties in it, and none of them have any dank. None of them have, other than Cascade, have any citrus. No Mosaic, no Simcoe, no Amarillo, no Azaka, no Nelson Sauvin. I mean, the New Zealand hops we were getting back then were coming in so oxidized they were almost unusable. But they were becoming available then, but not like they are now with the knowing that hops need to be cold. Maybe I don't know. Well, they knew that all along. But the point just being that the quiver, the brewer's quiver with hops was much smaller in those days.
Sure.
And then CFJ 90 came, and that was like revolutionary. That was like the Super Cascade, which became Centennial.
Yeah.
And it's still a workhorse for a lot of breweries. Like we use a lot of Centennials here still, just because they have a classic citrus punch that they only have, you know.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so another ad in the paper popped up. This was for a brewery in Bend, Oregon called Deschutes, and at the time, I'd left McMenamins, and I was I had a home brewing injury, which cut my foot open, and then I couldn't work for 2 months. My foot was in a cast, and make a long story short, I left McMenamins, and I had some time between there where I wasn't really working, and but I was working on a project with a guy in Bend to possibly open a brew pub over there, and but he had great aspirations, but didn't have any of the backing he needed. And when push came to shove, and we were at UC Davis had a weekend class, beer and brewing, and the first day was the business side, the second day was the brewing side. And I said, Dwayne, we need to go with this. You need to understand more of what's going on. And he said, cool, let's do it. So we went down there, and I first met Dr. Lewis, and Dr. Lewis was gracious enough to say, well, bring your friend tomorrow. He can do the brewing thing for free. And so I was able to go the second day. And so I first met him before I did some brewing school with him, some week intensives there later on. But anyhow, on that trip, I realized that this wasn't going to work out as a partnership. It wasn't going to work out because there was money in the room. We're in these rooms with people with money,
right?
And I'm like, the money's right in this room, but he wanted, couldn't blame him. He didn't want to go that route. So that all fell apart, and I kept the whole time. These 2 months, I kept seeing this ad in the Oregonian that says brewer wanted. Deschutes Brewery, Bend, Oregon, and a phone number. And so after this ill-fated trip, Dwayne went on his way back to Bend, and I picked the phone up, and he left my apartment. Not a minute later, I had the phone up, dialing the number. I said, my name's John Harris. I'm 2 years experience, and I'm your brewer. And he said,
I'm your brewer. Throwing it down.
And long story short, Gary Fish, invited me over for an interview. At that point, he also he was under construction. He was, well into opening,
Right.
He was having a hard time finding
this was the pub, right?
The original pub. Yeah, he was having a hard time finding a brewer because he wanted a brewer with some experience. He just didn't want someone out of Davis who never actually made beer before at a professional level.
Right.
And anyhow, I know I'm rambling on my history here, but I'll pick it up. But
no. This is fascinating.
But so
I can live in this world for a long, long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this guy Frank Appleton, who had opened Horseshoe Bay Brewery up in Canada.
Yeah.
Opened up Spinnaker's Brew Pub. So those are the two original OG Canadian breweries. One in Victoria and one in Vancouver. But anyhow, Frank was already on site because he hired to basically moved to Bend for 2 months to help get the brewery up and running and do the first batches in case we couldn't find a brewer.
Yeah.
So I went over, interviewed with Gary and with Frank, and I drove away, and I said, Gary, so I'll get back to you.
I mean, it's a long drive down there to Bend. You were committing to that.
Yeah, it was an overnight, but there was an old family that had moved to Bend, that lived across the street from my parents when I grew up, and they let me stay in their motorhome that night, so I had a free place to stay. So I just went down for the night.
Sure.
Actually, I may have. Well, I don't know what I did. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But a couple days later, I get hired, and I dealt. This question came at me twice, and I like, it's history. It's like, but there's one thing, John. Hey, Gary, what's that? And I want to make this much money an hour, and then he said that's good. Blah 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 blah. Well, I have this certain image I want to have behind the glass, and in front of the house at my restaurant, and that's hair above the collar. And I had a ponytail, and I'm like, nope, not cutting it. He's like, okay, I'll deal with it. When can he be down here? And I said, I'll talk to his family. I know, and I might be able to crash in their motorhome so I eventually ended up crashing in their motorhome until I could get an apartment. And then it was in Bend for just shy of 4 years.
Yeah. A little different place back then versus where it is now.
Oh, yeah. No, it was a struggle. I mean, yes, sir. What can I get you to drink? I'll have Coors. Sir, we make our own beer here. I'll have Coors. Well, "What, you like to try our golden ale, Cascade Golden Ale?" So it was a real struggle in that town. I mean, it was truly like, yellow beer town, and
Right. Sure.
there's a couple of bars in town that were serving some of the microbrews, and people are afraid of the microbrews. It was really the whole history is how people were afraid to even try a beer that was dark,
Right.
or a beer that was red, or the beer that didn't have that low body,
Right. What are these Deschutes years?
88 to 92.
Okay.
Yes, I was there in the very beginning.
Sure.
Technically, I was the first brewer in the history of Bend, Oregon.
Really?
Yeah, if you don't count Frank, he was the consultant, but he didn't. He was a consultant, so
Yeah,
he didn't really live there. There was never a brewery in Bend. There was a brewery in Prineville in the late 1800s or whatever, 1900s.
Right.
But there was no brewery in Bend until Deschutes.
I want to keep following this history forward, but first, supply chain challenges are here to stay for a while, so why not trust the experts to handle freight for your ingredients? Old Orchard has partnered with a leading logistics firm in the craft beverage industry to transport your craft concentrate blends. When you order 2 pails or more of concentrate from Old Orchard, you qualify for freight quotes from various carriers and can stay up to date on the status of your shipment. To get started on a freight quote for craft concentrates today, head over to oldorchard.com/brewer. Also, looking for a good lager yeast? Fermentus, the obvious choice for beverage fermentation, provides brewers large and small with the most complete portfolio of dry lager yeast available anywhere. To learn more about how Fermentus can improve the quality of your fermentation and for the latest on their exciting new product releases, visit fermentus.com. So 4 years at Deschutes. What was after that?
Yeah, so I was Deschutes for 4 years. We'd 1990, 90. We won 3 medals at GABF that year. It was pretty
A very nascent GABF, very early days there.
I believe it was Sierra Nevada, Anchor Liberty, Mirror Pond Pale Ale, top 3 in the Pale Ale category.
Yeah.
I was like, what? So, but that was pretty cool. But then just
Nice work.
No, yeah. I think I got a trip to Florida out of that one.
Hey.
Gary's like, "Where do you want to go?" And I'll go to Florida. It's wintertime, But anyhow, so I was at Deschutes for 4 years. Along that time, maybe got to be pretty good friends with Jamie Emerson, who was the brewmaster at Full Sail. And my partner, now wife, Jane, didn't really dig Bend very much, and it was kind of like an announced that she just really couldn't live there anymore, and she's still my wife today, 37 years later or whatever it is. And or 35, I can't remember anymore. Hope she doesn't hear this, so I should know, right? So
your secret is safe with all 30,000 people listening to this right now.
And at that point, also, we were just starting to talk about, we basically shoehorned every tank we could into Bond Street. We'd put in some double tanks in the cellar. We'd put in a 36 barrel fermenter and a couple of 24 barrel fermenters. We were brewing 12 barrel batches at the time. We had gotten the breweries on track to hit 7,000 barrels out of this production site, but that was still new, and there was only 5 breweries in Oregon at that point. Or 6 at that point. Still had it probably open, but they were a pub brewery in Eugene. But the point being is that the market was just wide open for growth, and we started discussions of what the next brewery size would be. So these discussions were getting going, and they were becoming really serious. And also, the fact that my wife, my current wife, is going to leave,
the only wife you've had.
And then Jamie, knowing that dissatisfaction with the town, said, "Hey man, we're looking about putting in a brewery in downtown Portland, and we're looking for someone to run it." And I was like, "Oh, speak more," And
Right.
And they were partnering with McCormick and Schmick's, where the McCormick and Schmick's big chain would own and run the restaurant. There'd be a glass wall. We'd be behind the glass wall brewing beer. We'd look like a brew pub, but we're not really a brew pub, but they would feature our beer, and kind of modeled after another one that was downtown that's gone now, which was the B. Malak pub with the Heathman Group, and then Widmer Brewery had a brewery down there. So the model had already seemed to work. So I accepted that job at Full Sail, and a lot of the reasons because, like I said, I didn't want to get into the project and then walk out on Gary. It was better for me to take this opportunity to get me back into Portland and stay with my wife, and so I ended up burning 20 years at Full Sail. And that's, I could tell a lot. I mean, that's just, I was there many years. So.
20 years at Full Sail.
Well, yeah, technically with my vacation pay, it was 20 years. It was like April April 20th to April 8th or something like that, 20 years later. So.
Real quick, what was the career arc through that? So you start thinking you're going to be at this Deschutes pub for a while. Where did you end up, and when you left Full Sail, what was your title?
I was a River Place brewmaster, so I ran the small brewery in Portland, doing mostly R&D and specialty batch stuff. For many years, I had a Brewmaster Reserve series, which I was responsible for basically grain to glass. I mean, what do you want to make?
Yeah.
Formulate the recipe, make the beer with another brewer, Phil, or whoever was helping me at that. I mean, at one point it was just me. I went through a lot of brewers, and a lot of these brewers have gone on to be at other breweries. So, but at a certain point, Full Sail decided that they didn't want to do the Brewers Masters Reserve series anymore. They wanted to do the Brewers Chair series, and so suddenly one day, I all of a sudden was basically told that your creativity, your access to creativity has basically been turned off now. And that I didn't feel very comfortable with that, knowing that I was given basically at Full Sail, they gave me my own little brewery, and I ran for the company. But it was really about, when we first opened, we were making golden ale and amber ale as much as we could. We're making 7-day beer. We're ripping it through the brew house. It's flying into kegs in Portland, and it was a keg only brewery at that point. Eventually, we would bring in mobile bottling to do some reserve bottles and such. But so once that happened,
they eventually launched the Session brand, make those little shorty bottles and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, that came out of Hood River for sure.
Yeah,
the Session the Session brand really helped Full Sail quite a lot. I mean, in 2000, the brewery was put up for sale by a couple of owners, and there was a Vijay Mallya who had acquired the Mendocino Brewery, which made Red Hawk Ale down in California. Made an aggressive offer to buy the company, backed out of the deal at the last minute. We thought we were going to be working for a new company at noon. They backed out of the deal at 11:50.
Oof.
Thinking the company would implode, then they would come back in and swoop it up for 30% on the dollar or whatever. And what ended up happening though was that before that, Jamie and Irene, the founders of the two that were operating the company, had pursued an ESOP, and the ESOP ended up being approved by the board because the other sale fell through. So then we became employee owned. So that was great, a great moment because everybody got shares then. So it actually got to be. You weren't managing the company. You weren't be able to walk up to Irene and tell her what to do or anything, but you were,
sure.
Doing ESOP. So, but I get back to that point where I was like, okay, if I'm going to open my own brewery, here I am. I can't remember how old I was, 48 at that point, probably saying, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to do this. And so I started poking around, and a couple of people said, I'd give you money. And in other words, I'd give you money. And I'm going to say I'd give you a lot of money. And when I got the lot of money, I was like, maybe this can happen. And so I decided
you were a known quantity at that, then like people could bank on you then.
Oh yeah. I made beer now for, I don't know how many long years, 20 some years at that point, 26 years. So yeah, I made beers. People had my beers. I felt, like I just in the process of being, on the management team of Full Sail. At one point actually being out selling beer for the company at one point, like selling the Brewmaster beer in the trades on the streets. The brewery was like, production, bringing it down. We want you to manage Colorado and Alaska. All right. So now I'm doing sales management in Colorado and Alaska. But what I'm learning is the whole beer business.
Right.
So when I decided to do this myself, I kind of knew what I was really getting into from the financial stresses to the, beer recipe development, to how to work with distributors, to how to work with chains. I kind of got a really good immersement in just the whole business side, the whole side of the business. And
right.
So with my wife's blessing and our 2 daughters not knowing much to say, what that's daddy doing? I'm like, quit my job in April of 2012. And then I thought, we'll be open before the end of the year. No problem.
Right.
Well, April of 2013, we signed a lease year, and now we're in the final year of our lease year, which is hard to believe that we're in our 10th year.
Wow. Yeah.
Heading towards our 9th anniversary. But anyhow, so it took about a year and a half to get open. It took about a year to find a building. It was really we just couldn't find the right location. And this used to be fenced. You can see some of the fence still there on the hillside, so people don't fall in loading dock. This was all fenced. It was razor wire. It was foreboding. It was at that point kind of a gray building.
Yeah.
And it was like, And I'd driven by this building countless times, and we're trying to find a building, trying to talk myself into how this building might work and how it might not work. And long story short, we found this building. My broker said, "Hey, have you seen this building?" I'm like, "I've drove by that building thousands of times." So I would just get in my car and drive,
right,
and look for buildings. So in April we signed a lease, and we were open by October that year. The contractor did a really good job, and so we started Ecliptic. It took a while, but I got the last piece of money I got, like the day I signed the lease. Someone was just wanting to make sure that was real, and then they handed the check over, and here we are. So
cool. Let's talk about.
I rambled quite a bit there. I'm sorry.
I think you've earned that, and so. But no, it's actually. I think it's really interesting to talk about those stories about what craft beer looked like, because it's easy to look at it from its current context and get wrapped up in, all of the current dramas of whatever today is, but it's also fantastic to, look back and just see where things have come from the 80s through today and just, chart that and pat everyone on the back who has led this through that kind of growth and that kind of development, because the quality of beer that American brewers, American craft brewers are making today is utterly fantastic. And it's night and day from making extract batches with no temperature control.
Very difficult.
With oven top fermenters at the old, original McMenamins locations.
I forgot about that brand new sanitary dustpan we used to scrape the yeast off the top and throw it over into the other batch. And top cropping.
Right. And so it's good to have that kind of perspective. Well, let's talk. I want to talk about as you decide to launch Ecliptic. Of course, you have to envision. Create an idea of what this brewery is going to be, what the beers are that the brewery makes, and how those are going to actually connect to people that drink them. Before we do that, with 20 years of innovation and experience, Brewmation specializes in electric, steam, and direct fire brewhouses, complete cellar solutions, and automated controls for the craft brewing industry. From a half barrel to 30 barrel systems, Brewmation puts you in control to design a brewery that fits your needs and brewing style. Whether you're starting a new brewery, upgrading your cellar, or just need some parts to keep you up and running, Brewmation has you covered. Visit them at brewmation.com/CBBpod to get started. Also, Arrived mobile point of sale powers places with personality. Arrived is streamlining business operations for the makers of craft with an all-in-one solution that was built with love by hospitality professionals. No contracts and no monthly fees make Arrived a no-brainer for your craft business. Go to arrived.com/CBB to set up a free customized demo. That's Arrived, ARRYVED.com/CBB. A different kind of POS has arrived. So, John, you decide to take on some investment and go launch your own thing, and now it's all you. It's sink or swim. You got to, prove that this crazy idea that you've got for making your own brewery is going to work. What does the next step in your creative process look like? Would you decide, hey, these are the beers we're going to make, or we're going to start making at least, and how do you start formulating that kind of brewing identity for Ecliptic?
Well, I wanted to. One thing I did at McMenamins that I don't know if people know, but they were the first brewery in America to use fruit, at least in the modern
wow.
craft times. Working with raspberries, blackberries, strawberries, rhubarb.
So they're the ones we have to blame for all of this.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And
just kidding.
At that point, Deschutes owner was not into fruit. Full Sail was not into fruit. So I knew I was going to brew with fruit right off the bat. It's like I'm going to be making some fruit beer, a beer I made. Early on at the Roadhouse, we found a grapevine, wild grape, looked like a tree, but it was a grape plant. And we picked all those and we, washed them and then threw them in the kettle and made a kind of, we don't know what kind of white grape, probably a Riesling or some, So I knew that I wanted to brew with fruit. So I knew I was going to try to recreate that beer that first year and got some juice from a winemaker.
Why did you know you were going to brew with fruit? Yeah,
because I thought it was awesome. I thought that, and then of course in that 24-year span between McMenamins and opening my brewery, actually 25 with the year I didn't actually brew because I was trying to open a brewery.
Yeah.
But those were some of the funnest beers, and of course but after that, by the late 80s, you were starting to see all the Belgian imports that were having way more fun with fruit than you could even imagine. And
Right.
And so just when that all came back, it was just like, I'm going to be doing this for sure. I already had my first beer plant. I already had my winemaker I was going to get juice from. It was all I already had that lined up, even though I didn't have a brewery yet. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
And I had this idea. I don't know, it was way before its time, but it didn't work. It was I really loved unfiltered pilsners. I loved you talked to a lot of brewers. The best pilsners really right off the Zwickel at about 4 weeks. Depends on the yeast strain. Could be 6 weeks. Just depends. Where some strains throw a lot of sulfur but it magically the yeast cleans it up, and before you know it, the beer is just awesome. And so I wanted to make a Zwickel Pils or a Keller Pils. I came up with the great idea to call it Hefepils because Hefe means yeast.
Yeah.
Yeast Pilsner, right? Hefepils. I thought I was brilliant. I thought no one had thought about this. But at that point, the word hef had been co-opted to mean wheat beer so much then, because even though it doesn't mean wheat, it means yeast, right? But I was convinced I could convince the public that, so I opened up the brewery.
There's, of course, no history of Hefeweizen right here in Portland, Oregon.
None whatsoever.
None whatsoever.
There's this little brewery called Widmer, but, and I tried for about it. This was the first bottle of beer we did other than our winter seasonal. And I brought it out. I tried. I had brewers come through and go, "Is this a wheat pilsner?" And I'm like, "Hefe means yeast." And I realized at a certain point, I was doing an in-store tasting in the early days. I'm out there sampling my beer. And,
Sure.
And I look over and look behind me, and there's a big stack of hef. There ain't no mention of Weizen, just hef, Hefe. And I'm like, I give up. I give up. This is not going to work. So I had to, the beer was great. It had a nice hop brightness to it. The yeast character, of course, when it was first bottled, was really prevalent. But over time, after about a month, the yeast will settle out. So the beer really evolved into a different being, kind of like Orval. You have an Orval at the, brand new. There's no Brett in there. But then over time, eventually, so the Hefepils would kind of do its thing, and no one can. I have that trademark of the other brewers out there. It's still mine. Anyhow,
one day it's going to come back. One day the memory of Hefeweizen here is going to fade, and you can pull it off.
It just didn't work. But I thought it was great. I thought it was brilliant, but I was wrong. So
did you take the beer and then rebrand it?
We eventually rebranded it as Spectra, but it was still a hoppy pilsner, and at that point, you get to a point in a brewery where you have to decide what you're going to make, and we decided to start canning, and we were going to can Orbiter IPA, which was our classic West Coast, light orange color, caramel malts in there, and then we had made a specialty batch of beer called Starburst just for a couple festivals, and as we got closer to having to decide what we were actually going to, put into the can, it became apparent that the market was heading away from the Orbiter style IPAs and the Starburst style IPAs with Mosaic Simcoe and Zoc Amarillo were starting to take over the market, and so a decision was made to go Starburst. And so the process of, as you're trying to grow your brewery, because we went 300 barrels, and we did 1,300 barrels, and we did 3,000 barrels, and we did 7,000 barrels, and we did 14,000 barrels, and we did 20. So we just had this after we started canning. In 2014, we started canning, and everything. Not 14. 2018, we started canning. And things just kind of snowballed, and all of our capacity was now taken up making Starburst. And so the Pilsner that we sold sporadically in a 22-ounce bottle, then into a 500 ml bottle, some beers had to die in order to have others live, I guess you would say. So you got to kind of pick your poison, and
sure.
And for us, that was the Starburst train, and so we hopped on that, and we do a Pilsner again now. It's a German Pils also, but it's not as Zwickel. It's just a traditional called Pixis, and it just came out about a year, not quite a year ago.
Sure.
But it's our network wide as of this year. So
let's talk about the evolution of West Coast IPA. Of course, being here in Portland, you are close to, very close to the Willamette Valley, that hop growing region. You're also really close to Yakima, a few hours away, in that northern direction or northeastern direction. You have plenty of access to hops, and yet Portland, seems to have its own vibe when it comes to West Coast IPA. It also has its own kind of dank character, and people here seem to like a certain kind of flavor in their IPA. Talk to me about how you've watched IPA develop over the last now 2.5, 3 decades.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I believe Burt Grant was the first one to brew an IPA in Yakima at one point before anybody else had brewed that style. One would argue that Anchor Liberty Ale is an IPA. I would argue that based on its alcohol content, but also with the fact that it's hoppy as crap.
Sure.
Just tons of dry hop character.
I think they've embraced that term now for it. Yeah.
And one might argue those were, to my mind, the two first IPAs. But in 1994, the Craft Brewers Conference came to Portland, and Full Sail was asked to brew the Symposium Ale, the conference beer, and we chose an IPA. But we took a take on it, very English. Challenger, East Kent Golding. I believe there was some Target in there, something like real English hops. And that beer eventually morphed into a Full Sail IPA that Full Sail did put out. And it was before Bridgeport IPA came out, but it was more of a seasonal specialty product than a year-round product. And then and this was, like I said, we were going English style on this, but then Bridgeport then eventually came out with Bridgeport IPA, which kind of relit their fire, which featured more of the classic Chinook, Cascade, Centennial hops, so the more citrusy forward, more fruity forward. And then, of course, now the modern, I call the modern IPA, which is after the discovery of Amarillo hop, discovery of Mosaic, the breeding programs and stuff that now gave us, Simcoe Mosaic, finding Galaxy out of New Zealand. List can go on,
right,
on the newer modern hops that people really enjoy to use. And so, but the West Coast was always, and then Full Sail eventually relaunched a new IPA with it in the more West Coast style, and we're talking about, these hops, bitterness in these beers. These beers, a lot of beers I did in the Brewmaster Reserve Series at Full Sail, I had, Sunspot IPA, I had Son of Spot IPA, I had Spotless IPA, I had the Grandson of Spot IPA, and the last one was Spotless. You
were brand extending before brand extending was cool. Look at that.
Well, I had this astronomy, I like astronomy, and Ecliptic is a totally astronomy themed naming of our products. But anyhow, so I had brewed a lot of IPAs, at Full Sail. Then we brought out our, a core year-round IPA, and I can't remember what year it was, but Full Sail eventually everybody had to start making an IPA because IPA became king, and now still king or queen, however you look at it. But it's really the game now, and so the tropical Starburst kind of IPA, like local beers like Breakside IPA, and so that really drive a lot of that citrus character with some Centennial and Cascade or whatever you might want to use, and then Amarillo kind of brings that started taking us towards a little bit of dank, and then of course the tropical hops of Mosaic and Azaka, for instance, just those. So and now we just even more hops. Now we have Cryo and Puff Dragon and Wonder Burst or whatever you want to call whatever next name's coming out for hop products, right? The whole thiol thing now with the hop scientists just in the last couple of years realizing that that's where these flavors are being derived from. We got thiolized yeast now that are been modified to. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, sure.
The hop rush is on it now, but it's interesting how that about 3 or 4 breweries in Oregon we're working on actually bringing a new beer out and naming it a West Coast IPA. Like the new West Coast IPA.
Right.
And for us, we did extensive trials to come up with what we call LIGO West Coast IPA, which just came out earlier this year. And we had found strata hops. But it's too interesting enough to you can't drop that into Starburst or into our Quasar Pale, for instance, or something like that. That's gonna that's like it's gonna change the flavor.
Yeah,
because it's more berry.
More berry.
Okay. Notes. So we've been looking for a place for that hop for a long time, and so
because Strata is also grown right here in Oregon.
Yeah, it's grown. I think it's an Indie Hops hop, and then but also Roy Farms, we get it from up in Yakima grows it. But anyhow, so we went to create this new beer in a 16-ounce format instead of a 12-ounce format because we knew that in that format we'd be able to we charge a bit more for those cases, and so we can make up this 3.5 pound per barrel dry hop we put in the damn thing.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
But
let's talk about like formulating that beer. So you had was Orbiter. Was that your old school traditional IPA? And then you have Starburst, which is a little more lean, a little more pale, and a little more contemporary. And now you try to launch LIGO, which is a now fully modern strata version. What are some of the recipe considerations that went along with some of those things?
Gotcha. Yeah.
Or especially with LIGO in particular, what were the points of differentiation?
Well, we have a 2-barrel pilot brewery now that we didn't have until about, I guess, 2 years ago now. So it's really allowed us to really experiment with hops and processes and stuff, and it's just been great because we don't have to commit to 28 kegs when we make something. It's like, okay, let's trial it. Try to cut the kettle to 12 instead of 15 in the old days, and now we're at a 30-barrel system, but you can still get 15 out of it. But anyway, long story. We just started with different. We kind of with a base malt recipe we wanted to go with. We knew we wanted it to have just a little bit more color than the Starburst. Just a little bit of a deeper gold color. So we knew we were going to be using a little bit of caramel malts in there.
Why a little bit of deeper gold color?
Just to differentiate it.
Okay.
Making it just a different, I mean, you can just, a lot of breweries I know have like a real base recipe for their IPA, and then it's just a different, the hops don't just change. They keep the same exact malt makeups. They really like what it's at.
Sure.
And having Phaser Hazy IPA and having Starburst IPA, and also having some seasonal IPAs, so we knew that we wanted this just to be a little different. And West Coast always had a little bit more color, so we didn't want it to be orange.
Right.
Just a touch, And then we just started. We kind of landed on Strata because we knew that we wanted to work with Strata. But then we trialed many different other hop varieties. We did about, I think, 8 test brews total trials through the 2-barrel system, and then having tastings by not just brewers tastings or brewery managers tasting, but salespeople tasting, public tasting, on tap at the bar. Alpha Gamma 1, Alpha Gamma 2, Alpha Gamma 3, Alpha Gamma 4. And it eventually we landed on the combination of the Strata Mosaic Simcoe as what we liked the best. We tried Chinook, we tried Centennials, we played around. We played around with a lot of different varieties.
Yeah,
but that's what we kind of landed on for the 3 main hops in the beer, and then we knew we wanted to have a punchy dry hop, and we knew that we brought the alcohol down to 6.5. Starburst is a 7.8 beer, so it's a hearty IPA. It's more
sure.
It hangs more with Pliny in that alcohol content. It's not double IPA as far as we're concerned. It's an IPA.
7.8. That's in the Imperial category, John.
I disagree. No, but my point is
you are allowed to be wrong.
Yeah, no. We just wanted. So this beer really wanted to land in a certain place, and the cool part was that we actually had the pilot brewery and the lab we have now, which has a gas chromatograph, spectrophotometer. I mean, we have a pretty, for our size PCR. I mean, we got a pretty elaborate lab, so we were able to really we can really dig in and analyze our beers a lot more, and having the pilot brewery to actually lead this whole development. We never had that process before. We'd always done pilot beers, but it would really kind of shooting for the win, right out of the gate.
Right.
And honestly, with all the, I haven't added up all the brewing experience here, but with me plus 30, Phil, who's our head brewer, runs the pilot brewery. He's plus 20 years. Got a couple of other guys who plus 20 years. I mean, we got like hundreds of years of experience so we're pretty comfortable having a pretty good idea what's going to happen with that yeast strain, with that. We used to use strains we really know, and not necessarily, like we did a collaboration with Georgetown recently, and the summer IPA, and we used their house yeast, and it just made the beer hazy. It's like we did not go for a hazy, we just went for what we got, but suddenly this beer wanted to be hazy.
Hey.
So it's just like, that's what the yeast did. It had some oats in there. That's probably what caused it.
Right.
And a pretty punchy dry hop in that one too. So I think the combination of sometimes you don't know what you're going to get. And sometimes you find stuff just like when a person said, Kurt Widmer said, "Can I get a keg of your Weizen unfiltered?" There was a Dublin pub, No. Okay, I'll give you one. Sold in 2 hours. You know what I mean? And before you knew it, Widmers were like just going, well, this is pretty cool. So you never know what you're going to get when you're making beer.
Sure. So with LIGO now, you're making this, you're designing this new West Coast IPA. You want to add a little bit of color to it. What do you build out of it for malt?
Oh, it's pretty much just pale malt with a touch of caramel.
Yeah,
that's it. Just a skosh. And keep most of our mashing profiles. We're a totally single temperature infusion mashing brewery. This is English style brewing as far as pedigree. There's no step mashing.
So the malt's pretty simple, in terms, but one of the concerns that everybody is certainly brewing West Coast IPAs these days has is, packaging longevity, especially with anything outside of those palest Pilsner or two-row malts. And you all find that you can package those effectively and that they'll hit your goals for time on the shelf, with a little bit of color in them.
Yeah, we're like I said, we're not talking like I'll get you a sample later before you go. It's not that much color. It's just a deeper golden than what you could have a normal 1.8 pale malt.
Sure.
Lava bond. So, like I said, we knew we had an idea. Like most modern IPAs are the finishing gravities of these are very, very low.
Yeah.
Comparatively to the previous times when you would want to stop at like 3 or 4 Plato, these are all at 2 Plato or under.
Right.
Really. So they're really very dried out. But what's interesting though is they don't, with that accelerated hopping in this more modern West Coast, just current IPA trends, is that these lower finishing gravities actually help bring the hop flavor out. So not just the malt's not getting in the way anymore.
Sure. You using any kind of at the same time like body feels good too, or are there any other techniques you guys are using to kind of build a rounder mouthfeel and body in these dry West Coast IPAs?
We're doing mostly infusion mashing below 150, so we're getting producing a lot of those dextrins. Or less dextrins, and more fermentable sugars. Like I said, I think it really gets down to a lot of times is like your hop flavor and how you use the hop flavor to balance all the flavors in the beer. It's not just because you're getting these essential oils and you're getting these different fruity compounds that really are kind of like not just providing bitterness in the beer like in the old days. You threw hops in to make it bitter.
Right.
Now it's more like you throw hops in to get affect a body, affect a mouthfeel, affect a flavor that's going to make you think it's maybe richer than it is. Things like that. Does that make sense?
Sure. How do you go about evaluating hops for flavor and then building combinations of hops in your West Coast IPAs?
A lot of times,
for example, what was this draw of Strata, and how did you then start thinking about how you blend Strata with other hops?
Well, Strata is a hop I think that's really unique. I think it's kind of like the original Cascade. When Cascade was found, the original Centennial or CFJ 90, when Gamache Farms found that Renegade Amarillo hop in the middle of the field and said, this looks different, tastes different, and smells different. And so there's certain watershed hops I think that hit the market, and I think Strata is one of those hops that kind of announced itself to the world. And like I said, it tends to throw more of a berry component, which is not the citrus component that you'd expect out of some hops. And so the challenge was to kind of bring the complementary hops into the beer, so we get that bit of that berry with a bit of the citrus and a touch of dank in that beer. That's what we're going for in that beer. So we just kind of played with the hops that might fall in those different categories and trial. Like I said, we did extensive trials on the beer, that more than we ever did on any other beer.
Sure. Now, I imagine you had contracts on some of the other hops that are going in with this too. But did it change? Knowing that they were going to need to blend in with Strata and amplify this kind of berry character, did it change? How you all selected some of those other hops?
Oh, as far as like picking lots, you mean?
Yeah.
Starting with a hop that you wouldn't want to contract yet because you don't know if you need it yet. You know what I mean? So Strata was more about our long-term relationship with Roy Farms, and they were growing it, and it was they had it, so we just basically started with their version of it. The thing about Roy is different than any other brokers. They go right to pellet. They don't bale anything. It gets pelletized right away. So that you can still evaluate pellets, but you're not evaluating the hop the same as you would if it was in the holy form. So so basically it's like there's everything's right to the pellet. So it's actually preserved immediately. So so we didn't really have any lots to choose from. You could say of that beer. But also I know that just my relationship with the Roy Farms, Andy Roy. Andy he came here, spent 3 months with us as an intern. Roy asked if they could have him come here, and they paid him. He just was a shift brewer early on, and learned all about how to make beer. And so we got a pretty good relationship with those guys. And I know that Andy's not going to. Andy's going to make sure he gets the right lot. But it is. I mean, but like I actually got a phone call yesterday about scheduling our selection for one broker in Yakima. And it is real. If you can, there are differences between the lots, and there's some that are better, and there's some growers that some brewers have longer term relationships with, and they get all those hops. They don't really ever make light. You know what I mean? I still remember one time at a broker, and it was at Full Sail. We were selecting Centennial or something, and the broker's like, "Would you like to see what Sierra Nevada selected?" If anybody can recognize that voice, you know who I'm impersonating. Yes, Sierra Nevada, I really like this hop, but they bought it all. Screw you, dude. So he brings this lot of Centennial out, and this is like, this was a friggin' bomb batch of Centennial hops. It wasn't 2 times better than the one we selected, but it was a better selection. And but they bought the whole damn lot because they're much, much, much bigger.
So much brewer FOMO induced right there from the missing out on the magical lot. Yeah.
I mean, but the thing though is, and I think with the arrival of the hop quality group 10 years ago or so now, I mean, the brewers trying to get the growers to understand that this is a food product, that this,
sure.
You want to clean those machines really good because you're only going to use them a month a year, 6 weeks a year, and not that they weren't clean. I'm not saying that at all, but I think that the brewers, this group pushed growers to innovate more. They pushed growers to be, better processing methods, kiln temperatures, cooling, way the hops are cooled. I mean, all these things were driven by, and then, direct brewer feedback. And so I think now the hop growers and brokers are really much more attuned to what brewers really want versus just that may be better for you to pull that vine 2 weeks early than we think it's ready for, but you're going to have a much better hop for the brewers if you let that sit 2 more weeks. So it's that whole hop side of just the grower relations and breeding to programs and things like that are much different now.
Let's flip around and talk a little bit about fruit beer. Obviously, you mentioned earlier on that this was going to be a big thing for Ecliptic, and it's something you've enjoyed making for large swaths of your career. As you envision a new fruit beer for Ecliptic, what's the creative process look like?
We made some different beers through the years. A lot of in-house beers with just different fruits. Between we make 2 year-round sour beers, a tangerine sour and a peach sour, and we realized at one point we were getting this peach puree, and the variety of peaches that was being processed was really stellar, and then that the producer was not able to get that particular lot of peaches.
Sure.
They switched to another variety, and it's like the peach flavor just dropped.
Ooh.
Like not negative, it was reality. And we had to change varieties. We couldn't get that variety anymore, and so we had to add an extra box to get the flavor up. So it's been really interesting to work with different fruits, especially on a year-round basis. As are we good? Are we good? Are we good? Yeah, we're good. Oh, we're out. Like there's an entire guava shortage right now. And a beer we're making right now is a seasonal called Flamingo Planet Guava Blonde Ale, which is just a straight ahead, blonde ale with guava. The guavas, we want the guava to be very flavorful, and a certain broker, couldn't get any. Another broker had some, so producers, we got their fruit, and their fruit's been good and just great. But we'd have to pay the shipping now, which is astronomical from out Midwest. And
sure.
So lots of times it gets around. Those are real considerations now. Unfortunately, with how much is that landed cost going to be for you? Because if you're bringing something like whiskey barrels out of Kentucky are going to cost a lot more to get to Oregon now than they did, and that's that's money. So it better be fruit or grain or the supply chain stuff's real. And right now, it's like, you got any guava? You got any guava? There's another brewery in town making a guava beer right now too, and they're having a hard time finding it also. So it's just, obviously any fruit beer you want to develop is, if you're going to tell them it's a fruit in there, you better taste it,
Yeah.
And that's one thing that we came to find, especially making sour beer. And these are all, lactic hot side sours. We actually have a souring tank that's designed to sour beer like you would in your kettle. is that, as you...
And so you do that for each individual batch and, pop it out into a tank and then go through a lactic souring process and then, pull it back and kill it, or...
Yeah, so we use a lactobacillus strain that hops kill, number one. Hops will kill it. So we'll make the wort, won't hop it, boil it, make sure the wort's sterile, cool it into the sour tank, lactose starter. Day and a half later, whenever we get our
Sure.
TA and our pH we want, back to the kettle, through a heat exchanger on the way back to the kettle, heat it up, and reverse process.
Right.
So you don't wait for this, 70, 80 degree liquid to get to a boil.
Yeah.
And then it depends on what kind of beer we're making. Like a blackberry sour, we normally would fruit that actually in the kettle, and it worked pretty good. But what we found with peach and others, we need fruit in the cellar to get the flavor we want. So it just depends what we're doing. But we found, especially with the sour fruit beers, is that there's a nuance that happens. And this, when we developed Carina 28 keg batches at a time, it's like too much fruit, not enough acidity. Too much acidity, not enough fruit. And so there's this real balance to get the acidity right with the fruit right, because too much of the fruit will cut the acidity, and too much acidity will cut the fruit. So it's very delicate beer to make. It's a tough beer to make.
Sure.
On an everyday basis.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, what's next for Ecliptic? What's big on the horizon? What's next for you all? And then, of course, what does success look like? Have you achieved it? Are you still pushing for it? You've been around for quite a while here in this world of brewing. What do you hope to still achieve with the time you've got here now with Ecliptic?
Well, one thing I definitely have learned from the Hafer Pills on from the fiasco, we won't talk about the sparkling ale fiasco. We won't talk about that one. Thought, well, Cooper's can make a sparkling ale. I can name a beer a sparkling ale. And everyone, what's a sparkling ale? What's a sparkling ale? Oh, forget it. No, the last 3 years have been tough as hell.
Sure.
2020, we had just remodeled the restaurant in February. We were open for 2 days before the governor shut us. 2 weeks before the governor shut us down. That was March, and that was Portland Dining Month. And Portland Dining Month is this really big month in Portland where it's like a July numbers in March, because people come out for these specials for restaurants. And we were 2 weeks into that. The cash was coming in. It was like, all right, this month is gonna just dump onto the loans we took. The whole thing just came crashing down, and our pub sat empty for many months, and having just been remodeled, and
sure,
and just the fermenters we had put in for 2020 actually got utilized big time. We were already a canning brewery anyway, at about 80% canning. So when the pandemic flipped, we went to 100% canning overnight, and cans were flying out the door left and right. A couple of breweries in Oregon, unfortunately, were draft only breweries, and they watched their entire market shrivel up in seconds. And so I called all those guys, said, "How you doing?" And they just flipped the canning as fast as they could. And but anyhow, and then 21 was tough. I'm sure the brewers listening to this right now, all that pandemic buying did not happen again in 2021.
Right.
And so what we thought was like this great year, going to be even greater year. We weren't even talking about that. Distributors weren't. We assumed it'd all be right back. And of course, so 21 was down for some brewers. Was down a little bit. For us, was not a whole lot, but down a little bit. And then, but this year has been really bizarre. 22's been really tough for a lot of craft brewers. The on-premise sales are just not public cancel it. Off-premise sales are just something's clicked, and you can look across the board and IRIs for Portland, and you'll see that every brewery's down, pretty much. And it's just, and we don't know exactly why. Is it people but our draft sales are up, right? So we're up like 20-something% in draft sales, which is great. Our salespeople's killing it, but it's just interesting time. For me, it's just
the draft has come back. People are drinking on premise, but it's not replacing what they're not now buying in cans either.
Right, for across the board for everybody.
Sure.
And so
it's still not back up to that pre-pandemic level of people going to tap rooms and drinking at them.
Oh no, 19 we were still struggling to meet demand, and we had made the right moves in the fall of 19 to be ready for 20, and it panned out. But the point just is, I think right now it's just a tough time for craft beer. I think a little bit. People are still coming into the restaurant and stuff, but people are just still leery, I think.
Sure.
This whole COVID thing. And, our goal is, we have got our beer plan together for next year, and got some fun stuff. We're going to keep doing this Moon Room series, lager styles. We're just trying to show the fact that we can, we're primarily an ale brewery, but we can make really good lagers too. And so that's been pretty good. But but just right now, it's just especially in the restaurant side, it's just tough. It's hard to find staff. It's hard to keep staff. I mean, we had a second location going that we had to shutter temporarily because we couldn't staff this restaurant. And we still struggle to staff this restaurant every week. We got people picking up shifts off poached shifts. It's like dishwasher for hire. They come in and help you out, and for one night, one shift, then they're gone. And so it's just we had to shutter one of our second tap room just because we couldn't. It was like we were closing one, then closing the other one. And it was like, no, we got to keep. This is our big location, so we had to keep this open. So so just not to paint a desperate picture, but it's not desperate. But it's just tough right now. But we're still goals to still make creative, innovative beers. See what I learned. The biggest thing is you got to make the beers people want to drink. That's one thing I learned along. I learned that really in the first couple of years was making beer. That some of my crazy styles that didn't, I wanted to make this double Pilsner because I had made one before. It's like, well, it's a Pilsner though. It's not a Bock beer, because it still tastes like a Pilsner, but just happens to be 7% alcohol, right? So great idea. I hired my first sales manager, my current sales manager, and she says, what's with this double Pilsner thing? I'm like, I was all excited about it. It's going to be, use these hops and blah, blah. And she's like, yeah. I'm like, whoa, what, you want a blackberry sour? She's like, now we're talking, So I'm like, okay. So we made Ultraviolet Blackberry Sour, and it was our first, lactic sour beer we ever did, and sold great. Just so I really learned, and I have learned through just the last, we'll be 9 in October, is that, you got to make the beers people want to drink. You got to keep, right. You can't just sit there and say, I'm going to make an English mild. I mean, you can, but you're just not going to be making that much beer. And if that's your business plan, your business strategy, will help all the best to you. But there's definitely, consumers are driving what people want to drink, and you just got to keep your eye on the ball, I say,
Absolutely. Well, that sounds like a great place to bring this to a close. G&D's microchannel condensers are highly efficient in hotter regions, and of course, they've been operating behind us as we've been talking all through this. ProBrew has the equipment, systems, and technology to take your brewery to the next level. Think outside the puree box with Old Orchard's craft concentrate blends. Fermentus provides brewers large and small with the most complete portfolio of dry lager yeast available anywhere. Brewmation puts you in control to design a brewery that fits your needs and brewing style. And Arrived mobile point of sale powers places with personality. Go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button, support what we do, make it possible for us to bring you these conversations every week. John Harris, Ecliptic Brewing. If people want to learn more about Ecliptic, where do they find you?
Our website, eclipticbrewing.com, or you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the usual spots.
Yeah.
We're always telling people what we got coming, and we always got something new coming out. Not every week, for instance, but we dumped 4 new beers in the last week here. So we got a lot of those.
Hey. Well, thanks for joining me on the podcast. Cheers.
All right. Thanks, Jamie. Cheers, man.
This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.